Prologue. Open fire. It was over. Gary Hutch was one hell of a lucky man. He had made the serious mistake of deciding to take on the Kinahans in a direct hit. The plan was to take out Daniel, son and heir of Christy Dapper Don Kinahan, and save his own life. Tensions had grown to a point where Hutch felt he had to strike first before he was targeted. Not only had he made his own frustrations known after he had not seen a return on money he had invested in drugs with the cartel, cash he had earned from a tiger kidnapping in Dublin in 2009, he had also been labelled as a rat. But the attack he organised went wrong. Someone was shot, but it wasn't Daniel Kinahan. An innocent man, boxer Jamie Moore, was hit instead. Another mistake, but he had lived to tell the tale. Gary Hutch had made a catastrophic error. He had squared up to the wrong family. But it was all sorted now. Gary's brother Patrick had stood there and taken a bullet to the leg in a punishment shooting, and Gary had handed over a €200,000 compensation payment. He owed his life to his uncle, Jerry the Monk Hutch, who had brokered the peace deal following a series of meetings with the Kinahans. It was a nasty episode that everyone could now put behind them. Gary could get back to Spain and resume his work in the drug trafficking industry, though he knew he would have to start afresh, away from the Kinahans. But at least that was the end of it. As Gary Hutch made his way back to his rented apartment on the Costa del Sol, he had forgotten two very important things. Daniel Kinahan hadn't got to where he was, his father's right-hand man in a multi-million-euro international drug cartel, by being the forgiving kind. And his credibility in gangland terms meant everything to him. He would not let this go. 25th of September, 2015. The man had been waiting in the basement car park for over 2 hours. The minutes continued to tick past, and he waited patiently. Gary Hutch was heading out for a run. He left his place in the Angel de Miraflores apartment block, Estepona, on the Costa del Sol, and made his way down to the basement to get his car. He was dressed in a bright orange top and shorts, all set for another warm, sunny day. He pressed the fob and the car beeped. He pulled open the door. And then it happened. The man was suddenly beside him, and Gary Hutch was looking down the barrel of a gun pointed at him. The tall man holding it was masked. He pulled the trigger. The gun jammed. Gary Hutch turned and fled for his life. He pelted across the car park, leading his assassin only by yards. He sprinted towards the communal area and circled the pool twice, panic-stricken. The hitman kept coming, gun ready. He fired again and again at his moving target, letting off about 15 shots in total. Residents looked up from their morning coffees, wondering what was causing the weird sounds they could hear. It was the bangs of the bullets and the clatters of the bullet casings hopping on the pavement. Eyewitnesses who looked out from their apartments at the commotion thought it was a joke, but then they saw the tall man in black, wearing a balaclava, gloves, and holding a gun. They realized it was anything but a joke. Gary Hutch kept running, trying to duck away from the bullets, attempting to put space between him and the man chasing him. His eyes darted about for an escape route. Then he saw it, the gateway. If he was first out through that, he'd make it. He sprinted towards the gate and reached it before the hitman. He grabbed the handle. It was locked. He was trapped. No way out but past the man coming fast up behind him. He roared desperately, "No! No! No!" He spun around looking for any other way out. The first bullet hit him in the back. Gary Hutch fell forward, collapsing onto the ground, and lay there, gasping, defenseless. The hitman was out of breath too, but he paused, meters away, steadied himself. He pointed his gun. 2 headshots. Job done. It was over. We will never know if Gary Hutch recognized the killer as the man he had once shared wine, hookers, and good times with not so long ago. But whoever he was, he had ensured there were no mistakes. Now the assassin had to get away. He was so exhausted from the pursuit, he was sweating and breathless and could not run from the scene. Instead, he traipsed wearily up a hill, threw himself over a fence, and climbed into a BMW X3 that was parked up and waiting. The stolen car was driven to a location in nearby Marbella and set alight. This was when his luck ran out. A local spotted the blazing car and grabbed a fire extinguisher to tackle the flames. The car was only partially burnt out. When the police searched it, they found a semi-automatic 9mm Glock pistol and a semi-automatic Colt 1911 pistol and 2 baseball caps, one burnt and the other in good condition. It was all bagged up as evidence. Back at the apartment complex, people were examining the scene of crime. Gary Hutch's body lay where he had fallen, and they found car keys beside him. They went down to the basement, and there was his car, with a door standing open, and the events of the morning began to be pieced together. Gary Hutch was dead. The peace deal hadn't held for long. For those who thought this daylight murder was finally an end to it, they were making the same old mistake. 3 months later, the Kinahans came for the monk. Gary Hutch was celebrating New Year's Eve in Lanzarote when the assassins arrived. But he was quicker than his nephew and got away. It was an audacious move, though, an attempt to take out the criminal godfather in a bid to ensure he would not seek retribution for his nephew's murder. It couldn't go unanswered. 5th of February 2016. The 5 gunmen stormed the Regency Hotel in North Dublin. They were well prepared, one dressed in drag, 3 in Garda SWAT-like uniforms, and 1 undisguised. The Kinahan-associated MGM boxing outfit was holding a weigh-in ahead of the Clash of the Clans fight night later that week. Daniel Kinahan was in attendance. It was time for revenge. In a hail of gunfire, Kinahan cartel Lieutenant David Byrne was shot 6 times, to the head, face, chest, stomach, hand and legs, and his body was left lying flat against the reception desk. Kinahan Lieutenant Sean McGovern was shot in the leg. Daniel Kinahan managed to escape unscathed from the second Hutch gang attempt on his life. The attack was daring and deadly. In the aftermath, a hit list was compiled by leading Kinahan associates. Their strikeback came within 3 days. Eddie Neddy Hutch, an older brother of the monk, was assassinated outside his home on Poplar Row in Dublin's north inner city. The Hutch family were left reeling and decided to make their feelings clear in a statement to the Sunday Times. It read, "Gary had a falling out with the Kinahan organisation. This matter was resolved, and €200,000 in cash was paid over to the Kinahans. We shook hands and agreed to walk away. Gary was then murdered for no reason. You cannot trust these people. The Kinahan organisation have attempted to kill Gerard on several occasions in recent months. We are being terrorised by the cartel. Kinahan's representatives said members of our family would be killed or forced to leave their homes and Ireland if their demands for money were not met. We believe the Kinahan drugs cartel murdered Eddie at his home in Dublin, having approached him days before with demands for money. Our extended family are under threat from these people. Our family are not involved in any drugs war. We are well known in the North Inner City and have no involvement in drugs. Our family are involved in various charitable, religious and sports groups which help young people. We are not involved in drug dealing." This move may have gained some sympathy among the public, but not with the cartel. A line had been crossed on both sides, and it would unleash a whole new type of violence never before seen in Irish society. The Kinahan gang gathered dozens of killers and logistics men to target Hutch gang members, their families and their friends. They ranged from professional guns for hire, like the Estonian hitman known as the Butcher, and a former British Army soldier, to the strategic quartermaster Mr. Nobody, and the desperate-for-cash foot soldiers on the streets. Money was their power, and the Kinahans were buying death. 11th of June 2018. On the first day of his trial, James Quinn, born 19th of August 1982, stood accused of being the triggerman in the Gary Hutch murder. He was a close friend of Daniel and Christopher Kinahan Jr. from their childhood days in Dublin's south inner city. Quinn possessed a chilling persona, which even the most seasoned investigators feared. It was his DNA that had been found on one of the baseball caps recovered from the charred BMW getaway vehicle, which had led him to this moment, standing trial in a court in Malaga. After a 4-day trial, the jury opted to convict him of being a necessary participant to murder, but not the gunman, instead acting as lookout and getaway driver. He got 22 years. During Quinn's trial, a senior Spanish investigator stated that Daniel Kinahan had ordered Gary Hutch's murder. Garda would later state, during a sentencing hearing in Dublin's Special Criminal Court, that the cartel was responsible for execution-type murders based on a perceived requirement to protect its core activities, drugs and firearms trafficking on an international scale. They described how the cartel operates on a hierarchical structure, which includes subcell structures. These units carry out specific tasks designed to enhance the capabilities of the organization and to advance its core activities. The subcells operate on the basis of directions issued by senior figures within the gang. Their aim is to segregate the activities of each group, limiting the overall knowledge of those further down the hierarchy. Each subcell also has an individual internal hierarchy, and this structure has similar intent and purpose to that of the overall group. The Gardaí were describing a very organized, military-style approach to crime, a method that had ensured the Kinahan organized crime gang was feared and successful in equal measure. The revelations about the group's modus operandi and their level of wealth had been uncovered and established during extensive cross-border investigations of the gang. But before that day in the Special Criminal Court would arrive, Garda would spend years investigating a chain of murders and attempted killings that rocked Dublin City and destroyed lives and families. The feud had begun, and it was going to be a one-sided, bloody assault. Chapter 1. Who'd you kill, Jeff? 29th of February, 2016. Murder of Vincent Ryan. I'm a prisoner in my own mind, said by Kelly, partner of the victim. On the evening of the 24th of February 2016, a telephone call was made to Coolock Garda station in North Dublin. Initially, the caller remained silent as the guard manning the phones asked them to explain their reason for contacting one of the busiest stations in the capital. Detective Superintendent Paul Scott, now retired, knows only too well how a shift went in that district. Coolock was an extremely busy station. No day was ever the same. The calls that came in were about drug dealing, domestic violence, violent assaults, burglaries, and other forms of serious crime. In 2016, Garda and Coolock also had major gangland figures such as Robbie Lawler to contend with. This call was different. This time, career criminal Jeffrey Morrow was at the end of the line, and he was pleading for help. Dubliner Morrow, born 21st of March 1982, was regarded by one senior security source as a serious gangland criminal with 115 previous convictions for some very serious offences, ranging from theft to armed robbery. He has a criminal career and network that spans throughout Dublin. He is violent and dangerous. In another analysis of Morrow's involvement in organised crime, detectives described him as having a very violent disposition towards authority, and he is known to have access to firearms. Jeffrey Morrow also associates with a number of violent criminals in the Finglas and Greater Dublin area. It is not known if he is affiliated with any particular gang, and would appear to have associates linked to many gangs. Among some of his more serious convictions was a 5-year sentence he received in March 2006 for possession of a shotgun, cocaine, and a Garda baton. His links to serious organised crime gangs were exposed in November 2007 when he was arrested along with gang boss Eamon the Don Dunn, who was murdered in April 2010 on the orders of the Kinahan cartel. On that occasion, Both Morrow and Dunn were part of a gang that tried to steal €955,000 from a cash-in-transit van delivering to an ATM machine at the Tesco store in Selbridge, County Kildare, on the 2nd of November 2007. As the raiders closed in on their target, Garda moved in and made 7 arrests. Morrow, who was banned from driving for 15 years in December 2006 for driving without insurance, was later charged with armed robbery. During his appearance at Dublin Circuit Court on the 29th of October 2009, he addressed the court and said, "All I want to do here today is clear my name. I never said anything about anybody. It was not my fault other people were arrested that day." The prolific criminal, who claimed that he had been in Selbridge that day to steal a car, also addressed the issue of his guilty plea when he said, "I pleaded not guilty all along. I only changed my plea to get it all over with." He also claimed to have gone off his head on cocaine after the death of a relative at the time of the incident. Following the conclusion of the court case, he received a 6-year sentence on top of the 5 years he had already received for possession of firearms. During his time in the Irish prison system, which he spent entirely in Dublin's Mountjoy prison, he was often placed in protective custody after being warned that his life was in danger from rival criminals. According to one senior prison source, Morrow just couldn't help himself. He was constantly issuing threats and mouthing off to other inmates. People were getting fed up with him, and that's why he came under threat at different times during his incarceration. Released from custody in 2014, Morrow did not come to the attention of Gardaí until his telephone call to Coolock Garda station 2 years later. That didn't mean he was going straight. Detectives suspected that he had continued his association with senior figures in organised crime, including Eastern European criminals based in the Clondalkin area, who were once aligned with gang boss Carl Breen before his death from a drugs overdose in February 2015. Morrow's gangland connections were kept below the radar, and he presented himself as a used car dealer, often offering vehicles for sale on websites such as dundeal.ie. He also worked as a takeaway driver, delivering fast food across North Dublin. In reality, Gardaí suspected he was heavily involved in the stolen car trade across West Dublin. As one investigator pointed out, there was a lot of suspicion around Morrow's involvement in the stolen vehicles, especially across West Dublin, but nothing could ever be proven. He was also using aliases, and even though he had spent a long time in prison, Gardaí knew that for Morrow, old habits die hard. Then he made that call to the Gardaí in Coolock. During his bizarre telephone rant that day, the career criminal's conversation went as follows. Morrow: "How are you? Is that the guards?" Garda: "Coolock Garda Station, how can I help you?" Morrow, sounding agitated: "I was in a fight with one of the Ryan brothers. You know the ones from Donaghmede?" The Garda who took the call asked him to elaborate, and Morrow went on to describe how he was convinced that his home at Burnell Court on the Malahide Road in North Dublin was under surveillance by real IRA leader Vinnie Ryan and members of the dissident Republican group. A Garda patrol car was dispatched to Morrow's property, and following a search of the area, it was reported that nothing suspicious was found. Once the search of outside his property had been completed, details of Morrow's bout of paranoia were logged to the Garda Pulse system. At the time of the call, and although suspicious of Morrow's ongoing involvement in organised crime, Gardaí had no idea that he was plotting with others in the Kinahan cartel to commit yet another serious offence: murder. At the time Morrow's erratic call was made, Vinnie Ryan, born the 6th of August 1990, was unemployed and had just become a father for the first time after his partner gave birth to the couple's daughter. Obsessed with health and fitness, Ryan consumed little alcohol, and it was suspected he regularly used steroids. His other keen interest in 2016 was his love for scrambler bikes, which led him to make regular trips to the Wicklow Mountains with the Bikers for Life group. Influenced in his early years by his father Peter's support for the Provisional IRA during the Troubles, and his strong opposition to the Northern Ireland peace process after the signing of the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, the youngest member of the Ryan family was the perfect recruit for the real IRA. Alongside his father's romantic tales of Ireland's struggle against the British, Ryan was also influenced by his older brother Alan, who was 14 years old when the IRA ceasefire was announced in 1994. Just 4 years later, Alan was caught with a loaded pistol at his family home, and in 1999, he was found at a suspected real IRA training bunker in Stamullen, County Meath. Alan later received a 4-year sentence for possession of the firearm. Released from custody in 2007, the same year in which their father Peter died, Alan Ryan continued his involvement with the dissident Republican group. After turning 18 in 2008, Alan's brother Vincent was also welcomed into the fold. It wasn't long before he was making a name for himself. Over the next 2 years, the real IRA's war in Dublin was waged against drugs gangs, including those with links to the Kinahan cartel. By 2010, the Gardaí were well aware of Vincent Ryan and his associates in the Republican group. As one source stated, it is believed that Vincent, his brother Alan, and associates were engaged in many varied types of criminal and paramilitary activity on behalf of the real IRA. They were actively involved in a process of widespread extortion from drug dealers and other members of the criminal fraternity in the Carlow and Dublin area for financial gain, due to their real IRA status and their capacity for violence. They previously made attempts, and in many cases succeeded, in extorting large sums of cash for their use. They were involved in the business of door security at a number of venues throughout the city. Even though the real IRA's leaders maintained that cash from extortion rackets was donated to prisoner families and used for their war in the north, investigators suspected that the tax earned from criminal groups was used to fund a lavish lifestyle for members of the group, particularly the leader of its Dublin brigade, Alan Ryan. On the 3rd of May 2010, Vincent Ryan's associates abducted a suspected drug dealer from West Dublin, who can't be named for legal reasons, and brought him to Fairview Park on the north side of the city. He refused to cough up the money they said he owed, and they chopped 2 of his fingers off. At this time, those involved in drugs and other forms of organized crime were becoming more and more concerned by the dissident Republican group's increasing use of violence against their associates. That concern led to the formation of a group calling itself the Criminal Action Force. This was a group established by Alan Wilson and his cousin John, who styled themselves as criminals who were taking on the Republicans. Their response to the escalating real IRA violence came on the 26th of July, 2010. A hitman got out of a car being driven by an accomplice and walked up to the entrance door of Players Lounge pub in Fairview, North Dublin, armed with a special caliber Smith & Wesson revolver and a Zastava semi-automatic pistol. He opened fire. During the gun attack, 3 innocent people had miraculous escapes despite being shot. Doorman Wayne Barrett was shot twice in the head, 3 times in the left buttock and once in the thigh. One customer was shot in the chest, on the right side of his groin, in the foot and in the arm. A second customer was hit in the back and the forearm. Within weeks of the attack, investigators had identified their chief suspects, John Wilson and his cousin Alan Wilson, who was a Kinahan cartel gun for hire. Gardaí believed the pub, now closed and previously run by the father of former Ireland international footballer Anthony Stokes, was targeted because Alan Ryan was a regular customer there. Investigators suspected the attack was arranged by veteran criminal Sean Hunt, who blamed Alan and Vincent Ryan for the murder of his friend Collie Owens on the 9th of July 2010. At the time, Gardaí classified the shooting as one of the most reckless gun attacks ever carried out on a public street in this country. Former Detective Superintendent Paul Scott also said, "When I first looked at the CCTV footage of the shooting outside the Players Lounge, I was astonished no one had lost their life. It was more akin to the narco-style drive-by shootings in Mexico or mafia assassinations of the 1930s. While the crime attracted a lot of publicity at the time, due in part to the fact the shooting was connected with dissident Republican leader Alan Ryan, the enormity of the possible fatal consequences of the attack was missed in the public eye. Not so, however, for its innocent victims who suffered life-changing injuries as a result. The attack was significant as well, in that it was one of the first times in the history of the state in which those involved in organized crime had taken on Republican paramilitaries. But it did not stop Alan Ryan and his associates from continuing their extortion rackets and targeting major gangland figures who refused to donate to their cause. One such figure was 30-year-old Michael the Panda Kelly, a close associate of Eamon the Don Dunn and other major drug dealers operating across Dublin and the border counties. One meeting Kelly had with the Real IRA unit in Dublin in August 2011 ended abruptly when Kelly refused to hand over any cash. Unbeknownst to him at the time, Kelly had signed his own death warrant. On the 15th of September, he was targeted by a Real IRA hit team in the Clongriffin area just after he had visited his girlfriend, Quiva Robinson, who would go on to marry cartel leader Daniel Kinahan at the luxurious Burj Al Arab Hotel in 2017. As he walked away from his girlfriend's home, a gunman opened fire with an AK-47 assault rifle. Kelly slumped to the ground, and the gunman shot him once in the head. The killer and his accomplice made sure their target was dead by reversing their getaway car over him as he lay bleeding on the ground. Kelly's killing boosted morale among the two Ryan siblings, but the Real IRA's position of strength over the coming months would not last long. In the shadows, the drug lord nicknamed Mr. Big, who has no convictions but has been linked to 13 murders since 2000, had put the wheels in motion to kill the Republican group's leader, Alan Ryan. Recruited for the murder was Kenneth Finn from the Coolock area of North Dublin, who had previously been caught with firearms and ecstasy during a lengthy criminal career. Their plan was put into motion on the 3rd of September 2012 when Finn, who would be murdered in March 2018 by hitman Robbie Lawler, approached Ryan and shot him in the head at point-blank range in Grange Lodge Avenue, North Dublin. Following the shooting dead of Alan Ryan, the Real IRA in Dublin went into freefall, with the balance of power now resting with those involved in serious and organised crime. Ahead of Ryan's paramilitary-style funeral, a crowd of around 500 people gathered outside his family home in North Dublin. As they did so, 6 men emerged from the crowd in combat uniforms with their faces covered and fired shots over the dissident leader's coffin. Then the 6 men melted back into the crowd. Just a few weeks after the funeral, on the 22nd of September, the surviving Ryan brother, Vincent, was charged with possession of an AK-47 assault rifle and membership of an illegal organisation on the same day that Kelly was murdered. When charged in connection with the Kelly murder, Vincent Ryan, who was unemployed at the time, was receiving his social welfare payments through the post. The decision had been made for him to receive the payments in this way because of Garda concerns for staff and other people visiting the local welfare offices based in Kilbarrack, North Dublin. No one wanted another reckless gun attack on the streets of Dublin. Vincent Ryan received a welcome boost on the 16th of March 2013 when the Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, ruled there would be no prosecution with regard to offences relating to membership of an illegal organisation arising from the funeral. His good fortune before the courts continued on the 24th of October that year, when, 17 days after his trial for the firearms offences in connection with the Kelly murder started, the trial collapsed due to lack of evidence. Following his victories before the courts, Vincent Ryan continued to associate with members of the Real IRA in Dublin, with Gardaí assessing that he was part of a somewhat fragmented group of the IRA in the Dublin region. Since the murder of his brother, Alan, the Dublin unit of the Real IRA had imploded, with many of its members going their separate ways. Some continued to align themselves with key dissident figures in the north, while Vincent Ryan concentrated on his career as a barber and his passion for motorbikes. His only interaction with dissident Republicans appeared to be at commemorations. By the summer of 2015, he was preparing to become a father for the first time, and perhaps hoping to put his past behind him. On the 29th of October 2015, Vincent Ryan had just left a checkup with his partner at the Rotunda Hospital. As the couple walked along Parnell Square North, he was attacked by a man with a knife and sliced up the right side of the face, from his chin to the base of his right ear. He was taken to the Mater Hospital for treatment, and later discharged and left with permanent scarring as a reminder. The gangster known as Mr. Big and an associate of his were later arrested by detectives in connection with the attack, but did not face any charges due to lack of evidence. Following the incident, Ryan did not return to work and maintained a low profile as he prepared to welcome his daughter into the world. Just 3 years after the murder of his brother, the latest attack on another member of the Ryan family proved the real IRA were no longer major players in the world of organized crime. Although first targeted by Mr. Big, it was the turn of Daniel Kinahan's transnational gang to have him in their sights after the murder of cartel Lieutenant David Byrne at the Regency Hotel in Dublin on the 5th of February 2016. Following Byrne's killing, Garda believed Kinahan's associates compiled a list of individuals they thought could declare support for the Hutch gang in their ongoing feud. As former Assistant Commissioner Michael O'Sullivan explained, the Kinahan organised crime group were targeting people because they could. They had the resources to offer people huge amounts of cash to kill people. If they perceived someone to be a threat, even without any shred of evidence, that person would be a target for murder. It didn't matter who you were or if you weren't involved in anything. You could still be killed just because a Kinahan gang member had a certain thought. That's how cheap life was to them. Unfortunately for Vincent Ryan, and despite having no connection to Jerry the Monk Hutch, he was one of a number of individuals identified as a cartel target, simply because of his previous involvement in violent dissident Republican activity. The plan to eliminate him as a potential recruit to the cartel's enemies was underway in the days after a cartel hit team from North Dublin murdered the Monk's brother Eddie on the 8th of February. On the 29th of February 2016, Ryan and his partner, along with their new baby daughter, spent the morning and enjoyed lunch at the Ryan family home in Grange Abbey Drive. They had stayed there the previous night, talking about their plans to marry. At 2:45 p.m. that day, the couple and their child left Donamead in Ryan's distinctive white Volkswagen Golf. Ironically, the white Golf was registered to LS Active Car Sales, a company run by senior Kinahan cartel figures Liam Byrne and Sean McGovern, before its assets were seized by the Criminal Assets Bureau under Operation Lamp. The family arrived at his partner's family home in McKee Road, Finglas, North Dublin, at 3:07 p.m, and the mother and child walked into the house, while Ryan remained in the car, waving at Ms. Smith's brother Keith. As Ryan sat in his car, a silver Volkswagen Golf pulled up alongside. At 3:10 p.m, the passenger in the silver car opened fire from a 9mm Makarov Rak submachine gun, hitting Ryan in the right shoulder, right temple, and right hand. In total, 14 shots were fired, with one stray bullet later recovered from the Smith family home. 3 minutes after the gunman opened fire, the first of 4 999 calls to Garda reported hearing a noise of shots and screaming. Brought to the Mater Hospital, Vincent Ryan was pronounced dead at 9:05 that evening. Following the shooting, an incident room was established at Finglas Garda Station under the command of Senior Investigating Officer Detective Inspector Colin Murphy, now a detective superintendent. Among the first pieces of information investigators received were reports of a silver Golf found burnt out at Red Lane, Newhall, Naas, County Kildare. A firefighter with Naas Fire Station extinguished the blaze and managed to identify the vehicle's chassis number. Garda also recovered a registration plate beside the vehicle. The following day, detectives established that the registration plates were false, as the chassis number matched a vehicle stolen on the 13th of October 2015 from a house in Carbery, also County Kildare. The investigation focused on the sourcing of CCTV from nearby premises and properties. Analysis of the footage showed the stolen car in the McKee Road area on the 27th and 28th of February, and at 32 different locations that day. Gardaí were also able to use the automatic number plate recognition (ANPR) system as part of their efforts to track the movement of the getaway car. The system works by cameras placed at fixed locations across the capital, recording and logging the registration of each vehicle that passes. As the investigation continued in the days following the murder, detectives received a boost when the hit team's stolen car was logged on the ANPR system travelling out of the Palmerstown bypass and onto the N4 road. Crucially, the Volkswagen Golf was also caught on the ANPR, driving in convoy with a Kia Sorento at 3:59 p.m. that day. The two vehicles were also captured at an ANPR site in Kill, County Kildare, at 4:12 p.m. Following the discovery of the burnt-out car at 4:30 p.m. on the day of the murder, the Kia Sorento, including details of its registration, was then captured by another ANPR camera in the Clondalkin area at 4:46 p.m., travelling towards Dublin City. As part of their extensive CCTV analysis, Gardaí also established that the stolen Golf had followed a car similar to the murder victims on the M50. Unbeknownst to the hit team, that car belonged to an off-duty Garda. In a breakthrough for Gardaí, officers further established that the Kia had been registered to Natalie Byrne from Cole Park Drive in Ballyfermot. Although Ms. Byrne was not involved in organised crime, the same could not be said of her partner, Paul O'Byrne. At the same time, an analysis of the Garda Pulse system led the detectives to Morrow's bizarre phone call on the evening of the 24th of February, 5 days before the murder. From that moment on, Morrow became a person of interest to the investigation team. The Garda team's suspicions were further raised when intelligence on Morrow identified O'Byrne as one of his key associates. At the time of the killing of Vincent Ryan, O'Byrne, born the 17th of September 1982, was not regarded as a major gangland player, despite his association with major criminals, including Geoffrey Morrow in the capital. Gardaí also suspected that he was a heavy drinker and frequent cocaine user, which led to him suffering from bouts of paranoia. Gardaí were made aware of his paranoia on 2 occasions in 2014, when he was brought to Tala Garda station after claiming he was being tracked by men with guns and that his house was bugged. The father of 6 admitted to Gardaí at the time that he had been consuming large quantities of cocaine. His 16 previous convictions included a 240-hour community service order for assault causing harm in 2003, while the rest were fines for road traffic matters. Due to O'Byrne's links to Morrow and to the car that drove in convoy with the getaway vehicle, and Morrow's complaint about Ryan, Gardaí were satisfied they had enough to arrest their prime suspects. At 9 a.m. on the 15th of March 2016, investigators from Finglas Garda Station made their move, swooping on O'Byrne's home in Cole Park Drive in Ballyfermot and Morrow's apartment in Burnell Court in Coolock. 5 days before the raids, Gardaí also recovered the Kia Sorento from a major gangland figure, who can't be named for legal reasons, in the Ballymun area of North Dublin. On the day of the Garda operation, O'Byrne was arrested by Detective Sergeant Gavin Ross, now a detective inspector, for withholding information in relation to a serious offence, while Morrow was arrested by Detective Sergeant Alan Brady, now a superintendent, on suspicion of Ryan's murder. During the search of O'Byrne's home, the Garda team established that the hard drive from the extensive CCTV system the suspect had installed at the property due to his paranoia had been removed. They also discovered a partially burnt mobile phone in a barbecue. It was a setback in their hunt for clues. But the following day they had a stroke of luck when they established that a man known as Pat had installed the CCTV at O'Byrne's home and had been socializing with O'Byrne at the Silver Granite pub the night before Gardaí arrived to conduct the search of his home. Gardaí obtained a warrant to recover the CCTV from the pub. When they examined it, they identified Morrow, O'Byrne, and Pat enjoying drinks. Although there was no sound on the footage, judging by their actions, Gardaí believed Morrow and O'Byrne were demonstrating Ryan's murder to their friend. As the murder suspects remained in Garda custody, detectives identified the mystery man, Pat, who can't be named for legal reasons, and searched his home in Kinnegad, County Westmeath, on the 17th of March. During a search of that property, Gardaí also gained access to a van. They found the CCTV hard drive from O'Byrne's home in the passenger footwell of the van. Once analysed, the CCTV displayed the movements of people at the Ballyfermot property on the day of Vincent Ryan's murder. At 2:10 p.m., the CCTV captured Morrow arriving at the house in the stolen Volkswagen Golf. Then it showed O'Byrne removing a green seat cover from the vehicle's boot and placing it in a wheelie bin located in the front garden. In their analysis of the CCTV, Gardaí were supported by Acume Forensics Limited in Leeds, UK. The company was able to identify and also show that mobile phone numbers associated with the suspects were pinging off masts in the same area where the cars were travelling. The company, which assists law enforcement agencies around the world, was also able to confirm that Morrow was the individual who collected O'Byrne from Cole Park Drive. During the raid on the suspect's home, the green cover was seized, along with mobile phones and electronic devices. The raid on Morrow's home also turned up mobile phones. In an examination of one of the phones seized at Morrow's property, Gardaí recovered 2 messages sent on the 7th of March, which both read, "Who did you murder, Jeff?" On the 12th of March, Gardaí were given an insight into the relationships of both men during an examination of O'Byrne's partner's phone when she sent a text to Morrow's partner, Amy Brown. "Jeff's and him together after fucking off out. If he's not back in 20 minutes, there be fucking murder." Amy Brown texted back, "He goes out at like 3 o'clock in the morning, telling me Paul and his mates are up drinking. Full lies. Karma a bitch. Leave them be." Following the arrests, Paul O'Byrne was held for 2 days before being released without charge. However, he was rearrested at his home on the 19th of March, this time on suspicion of murder after Gardaí had viewed the CCTV from the hard drive. During his time in custody, he was interviewed 22 times, replying no comment to all of the questions and evidence presented to him, before being released for a second time as the investigating team prepared their file for the DPP. Jeff Morrow, who also made no reply to the questions put to him during his 19 interviews, including a question about the phone call he made to Coolock Garda Station, was also released on the 21st of March. As the investigation continued, Gardaí had another breakthrough when the owner of the stolen Volkswagen Golf told them that the green cover was his and was used for his dogs to lie on. The green cover was analysed by Weatherby's Animal DNA Service, based in Kildare, and dog hairs recovered from it were matched to the car owner's 2 dogs. This tied the stolen car directly to O'Byrne. As the weeks passed, the major gangster who had possession of the Kia Sorento met with Gardaí on the 15th of June 2016 and denied all knowledge of the murder. But he did admit that he knew one of the suspects, that he had contacted a friend and asked him to try to help Vincent Ryan immediately after he was shot, and also that he had bought the Kia from a man known as Padgy. His interactions with Gardaí were not complete when he was arrested on the 21st of July 2016 for possession of information in relation to the murder of Vincent Ryan. At the time of his arrest, Gardaí had concluded that this man had serious criminal links and is known to Gardaí throughout Dublin. He has recently been arrested in relation to a murder which involves the feud between the Kinahan and Hutch gangs. It is suggested that he is a hired gun for the Kinahan crew. During his arrest period, He was interviewed 5 times and admitted that the real IRA had demanded €20,000 from him due to his involvement in drugs, and that he knew Alan Ryan from the Players' Lounge, and that Vincent Ryan had been in a local GAA club before his murder, hassling lads who were taking drugs. Later released without charge, the major gangland figure was classified as a person of interest as the investigation continued. Once the extensive Garda file had been completed in 2017, it was sent to the DPP to consider. In the meantime, Morrow had moved to the Manchester area, while O'Byrne continued to live in Dublin. In 2018, 2 years after the murder, the DPP contacted Gardaí to inform them that there was enough evidence to charge both men. Morrow was arrested in Manchester on a European arrest warrant on the 12th of March 2018. On the same day, O'Byrne appeared before a special sitting of Dublin District Court and was charged with murder. 10 days later, Morrow was brought back to Ireland, where he was also charged with the killing. Remanded in custody on the 24th of June 2019, both men went on trial at the Central Criminal Court for the murder. Evidence was presented to the court for 7 days before the case was dominated by legal argument for a 2-week period. On the 23rd of July 2019, both men pleaded guilty to helping a criminal organisation murder Vincent Ryan. Remanded in custody again, the pair returned to the court on the 31st of July 2019 to learn their fate. Morrow received an 11-year sentence, and O'Byrne received a 9-year sentence. In his address to the court, Mr. Justice Michael White said, "I find it difficult to understand why a man with no history of criminal activity got involved in such a serious crime. Every human life is valuable, and these criminal organizations, by the way they behave, have no respect for human life." In a message to those convicted over the shooting, Ryan's partner said, "You have gained nothing because you never knew Vincent and he never knew you." Addressing the media after the guilty pleas, Detective Superintendent Murphy said, "The sentencing shows on Garda Síochána's determination in combating organised crime gangs. Vincent Ryan's murder was brutal, callous and shocking, carried out in broad daylight as young children made their way home from school. I would like to thank the many people who gave evidence during the trial, and I would also like to acknowledge the words of Justice Michael White in commending the members of An Garda Síochána who investigated this murder to the highest professionalism." In her victim impact statement, Ryan's partner spoke of the heartbreak of those left behind. He lived for his family, but he only had 5 weeks with his daughter. He was such a proud dad and loved showing her off. I watched Vincent fighting for his life, struggling for every breath. It's an image that will stay with me forever. I'm a prisoner in my own mind. How do I explain to a 3-year-old girl that her daddy is never coming home? In those very early days of the Kinahan and Hutch feud, Vincent Ryan became the first dissident Republican to be targeted by the Kinahan Assassins. He would not be the last.
I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.